Initial teardown of the passenger side here. Got the bumper off, then the signal lights and the headlights, and then the fender came off. I did it without removing the inner splash shield, but it was a pain. Definitely would remove the inner splash shield first next time. So it's bad. I guess that's what I was expecting. That hole there on the bottom side is actually exactly where the bottom of the front fender bolts to. So there's two bolts side by side, and they're completely gone. The material that they bolt into is gone. Just so you can see there. Bottom lip, lots of rust, especially on this outer section of the quarter. If we go inside here, there's a thicker structural piece here, and it's definitely holding some strength there. So that's good. Yeah, got patches to do on the floor. We'll do that. So at least there's a backing here to weld this section of this repair that we need to do on the outside. Well, kind of on the outside of the car, but behind the fender. So I want to see how bad we're dealing with here. Sorry about this. I'm holding it with my left hand, so. That's definitely all gone. I'm not going to poke that too hard because I need to make a pattern of that, replicate it. This, aside from right in there, where it's detached, it's rusted away right at the flange. The rest of that's fine. So that's kind of nice. I am going to replace some amount of this. Definitely need to go probably a little further than that. Probably over to about there. So we're talking 10 inches or so of the visible part of the rocker, and then this piece, the support that's behind the fender. A piece of metal cut out of that 50 thou sheet, and I also cut a little sliver out of the same piece, the same thickness. And what I did with this is I bent it as a template for the rocker panel section, so that matches exactly. Now it's a little bit long here. I had originally formed it up and around this lip as well, but I cut that part off because I don't need to get up anywhere up into there. So this piece of metal, I think it's about 15. I cut it 15 inches long here, and that's looks like twice what I need on the car, but you know, it's better to have a little extra to begin with. I took the template, I made our first bend, and that was just, I clamped it between a piece of channel and a piece of square stock, and I tapped it over with a hammer. I just kept going back and forth until I had it 90 degrees. This, I don't know if you can tell from where my fingers are there, up around that bend. It's a very fuzzy piece of metal right now. That isn't actually a 90-degree bend. It's a little obtuse. It's a little open from 90. So after I had it bent at 90, put a homemade T-dolly in the vise, put my metal over it, and I just lightly tapped along that top edge as I slid the metal back and forth, and that opened it up a little bit. I just kept on comparing it to my template till I had that there. So where we're at last you saw was we had that 90-degree bend, or a little obtuse, and we had to make this curved bend. So what I did, I took a piece of pipe and a piece of angle, or actually channel, and I welded it at each end, and I put a little support under there. Between the pipe and the channel, there's a small gap, just wide enough to fit the sheet metal through. So once you get your bend start and end marked on the sheet metal, you place it in the groove, and you can form that roll over the pipe. You see the finish is a little hammered up here. I did have to do a little bit of tweaking on it to get it just right, but it fits really good. The next part is this section here. Now this gets tricky because it's hard to see here. It's all rusted away. But where the rocker panel was, this section here is parallel to the rocker panel, but it steps up slightly so that the thickness of the fender matches where the rocker panel is. Then up on the face here, it steps more than it did down here. That's probably about a 1/4 inch step there, and it's kind of hard to see, but you see this part actually tapers in. The lower one is parallel, but the face tapers in. So lots of fun stuff going on there. I took a piece of metal, I placed it there, lined up straight with the step, and then I traced on it the angle that's going to be right there. Then I took that piece of metal, and through the magic of video, it looks like that now. So this is the first one. Number 1's passenger side, number 2 will be driver's side. I just took block of wood and a piece of conveyor rubber, and I hammer formed that, a ball peen hammer and a radius body hammer. Just kept hitting in there, and it bent that all by itself. Took a pattern off of the car with this and got it to match. So that's how it was on the car. That's the line that I traced right there. So I knew that I need some at the bottom for a lip, and that my line, I couldn't trust the position of it, but I could trust the angle of it. So I took that line and I transposed it parallel up here, and that was the line that I used to hammer form it. So now that it doesn't fit down there yet, but when you line it up with that seam there, the bend is parallel with that face right there. So this, I believe this edge of this piece is going to remain as it is, and my rocker panel patch, where they weld together, they're not going to be butt welded together, but I will be dressing that small lip onto the edge of this rocker panel section and then welding it to the front. As promised, I get that formed on the edge of the rocker panel. So what I did, I traced a line parallel from the cut edge onto the panel here. I brought it back a 1/2 inch just so I made sure I had enough material to work with. And then I actually relieved this part because I don't need as large of a lip there. So I cut it out some. The two flat areas, oh, and I relieved this one as well because I know I don't have to get up here into the rocker panel. So this flat section, I just bent using the edge of the anvil portion of the vise. I bent around this radius here just using the end of a piece of pipe. I just put it over that and hammered down here. When I did that, this piece here raised up some, and in order to fix that, this area actually had to shrink a little bit. So I just used a torch, I heated that up red, and then I tapped it down here some, and that shrunk this area to the point where this is now flat. There's the fit up I've been going for. Still just a bit of a gap. I'm going to tune that a little bit, especially right down in there, and just grind the edge of that just a little bit more. But that is the exact profile I've been looking for. We've also made a bunch of progress on this patch. I think last time you saw it, it was clamped up in position, and I was just fitting this. So that's all welded, front and back. I welded it in the back first, then on the front, and then dressed up the front. And then I looked at the back, and when I ground down the weld some, I could see it hadn't penetrated great. So I actually ground it down and ran another pass again to make sure that it's welded solid there. So we're doing a combination of trimming on the patch and trimming on the car right now, and just getting that to fit perfectly into place. Even more fun here. So I've got most of cut away that I need to. Still going to trim up a little more. Car's been in and out of the shop probably half a dozen times since you've seen it last. Yeah, didn't get much done each time, but started to get a bit here. So yeah, I wasn't about to leave that rusted area behind there. I cut it out, I patched it on the bench, and then I welded it back in. And what you're looking at here is just put some primer over it. For the patch itself, so it probably looks pretty close to the same as you last saw it. I test mounted the fender, and I welded on this block with 2 tapped holes for mounting the fender. And that Sharpie line there along the back, that is how I was lining up the panel behind each time I went to fit it, so that it was fitting the exact same each time. So I clamped it on, I scribed the line on the rocker panel on the car where it needed to go. I cut that out, and then I just ground the edge of the patch until it fit really good. I probably had that on and off there 20 times, getting that fit. Getting that fit all the way across just right. So next step should be to weld this in. Just about to fire up the welder. This thing's going in. Fit up is better than I could have imagined. Profile looks good. I'm going to run a couple tacks across the top here wherever it's even and adjust it and get a few more tacks in there. And then I'll remove the clamps and I'll be able to get a few tacks under here and up here. And then once that's all in place, then I'll reposition the bottom and start filling in those plug welds. It's all tacked in across the top. Went very well. I've got it probably about 50% of the way where I want it welded, and just keep filling in between these tacks, and that'll be a solid weld the whole way. Bottom is fitting exactly where I want it. Still lines up on the back. So I'll be making those plug welds here just after I'm done all this. So we're skipping ahead a little bit. Welded a whole bunch, just welded in between all those tacks until the weld was all solid. And then I got those spot welds along the bottom, the pinch weld done. And I rolled the bottom lip to match just as the factory rocker was. The front part was cut out. I noticed that on the other side, so I cut that out on this side. And then hit it with some primer. I know I didn't grind off the weld. We're going to run it like that until I do something big with the whole car. But so that should wrap up this particular repair. I got a few other repairs to do on the car. I realize I didn't film any of the actual work. I just kind of turned on the camera at certain key points and described what I was working on, how I was doing it, what tools I was using. Maybe I will, on the next one, I'll try to film some of the actual work, some of the cutting, hammering, welding, grinding, and we'll see how that goes.